We've been talking to this man for years. He's been covering the Pittsburgh Steelers for even longer. And every single time Gerry Dulac would come on this program at the end of the season, towards the end of the season, I'd be like, what's going on with Mike Tomlin there in Pittsburgh? So it's only fitting that joining us here on the Rich Eisen Show, the longtime Steelers radio network host, and so much more, joining us on a day in which Mike Tomlin has, in fact, left the Pittsburgh Steelers organization. Gerry Dulac here on the Rich Eisen Show. Good to see you, Gerry. How are you, sir?
Rich, I am well, and it's always nice to see you. I don't want to violate the Larry David rule, but I will wish you Happy New Year.
It's okay, Gerry. For you, I'll make any exception. You always do that for me, and I greatly appreciate it. I mean, you've zoomed into this show from the Steelers facility, from your spot there in your home, from the U.S. Open. You've done so much for this program because I'm always wondering what's up with the Steelers and what's up with Tomlin's future. And now we actually know Tomlin is no longer with the organization. What's your reporting and sense as to why this happened, Gerry?
You know, Rich, the one thing I learned today in talking to Art Rooney II was that he intended to bring Mike Tomlin back for another year. So this wasn't a case, if anybody thinks that that maybe the Steelers pushed him out or there was some agreement, you stepped down, we'll let you say you stepped down, but we want to make a change. That wasn't the case. When you've been in it 19 years, you're getting closer to the end than you are to the beginning. I don't think there's any question some of the failed frustration, 9 years without a playoff win. We all know it's 7 losses in a row, 9 one-and-dones. I'm sure it took a toll on Mike Tomlin, and so was I shocked? No, but I was a little surprised because I had not, other than just the rumors, which I don't put a lot of stock in. I didn't get any sense from him. Rich, you have a nice relationship with him, and he's a football junkie. He loves the game of football. And I just didn't see him walking away from it at this point in time. He always views every season as a challenge. And Lord knows, the last, however many years, 7 playoff appearances in a row. But he's been in the postseason 5 of the last 6 years. And the frustration of not getting beyond that, I think probably, it took its toll.
Well, I mean, he's a king of saying he doesn't listen to the outside noise. But the question is, did he hear it? He doesn't live in a cave, he lives in the community there, and he must know, he must be aware. He certainly heard it a couple of times in the stadium loudly this year, that there's a large section of the fan base that had enough of his tenure there. And I'm wondering if that's part of the reason why he did step down, that he heard it and he didn't want to be part of it anymore.
Well,
Gerry?
there's no question, Rich, he heard it because he's acknowledged in those instances, especially the one game during the regular season, the Buffalo game. I mean, he heard it and he said that. But how did it bother him? Oh, I'm sure he didn't like it. But no, he's not the type to let the outside fan noise or any disgruntled fan base chase him out from what he wants to do, especially when he has the backing of the ownership, which he did. And so I'm sure it played a small part in it. I don't know if this was the case. Maybe Mike Tomlin thought, we're not going forward here. And I'm actually harming the franchise. I'm actually harming the fan base. I can't tell you he thought that, but I wouldn't be surprised if, he kind of unselfishly thought that way and thought maybe it's just time. And again, he's been at it 19 years. And Rich, I've always, from what I've seen the last couple of years, look, this isn't about whether Mike Tomlin's a good coach or not. We know that. 193 wins, 8 division titles, 2 Super Bowl appearances, 1 win. 5 of the last 6 years in a postseason. This was about just the environment. And I've never, you hear people talk about this, that, you don't make change for the sake of changing, but I thought it was time to make a change for the sake of changing.
And so, again, you mentioned how he's a football guy, he's a competitor, he's and you didn't get the sense of him tiring of it or having it grinded down on him. And we spoke to him on this show on this actual day 1 week ago, and he talked about how he loves the challenge, how he had just sat in the film room by himself for hours. I was the first human he had spoken to all day, coming out and getting ready for this Monday night game. So are you surprised to hear that he doesn't intend to coach in 2026?
Yeah, Sarah? And that's what Art Rooney said today, that he it doesn't appear that he has any intention in the near future of coaching again. I didn't hear that from him. It's not that I dispute what Art II had to say. But I if you ask me, even before what Art Rooney said, would he be back coaching? In some form, yes. I saw Bill Cowher go through this, but it was different with Bill because initially his dispute with the Steelers was about money, and then that wasn't it at all. And he just reached a point where, he felt like it was time to step down, that he had had enough. And, that came just one full season after a Super Bowl. And people thought he would go back to coaching, and he never really did, as you saw. And I don't think he was willing to talk to some people, but I don't think he ever had the inclination to go back. I just think Mike Tomlin will. I could be wrong. He's never told me that, of course. But if he sits out for a couple of years, maybe he won't. I would have to, if I were a betting man, I would say he would probably be back in the NFL in some amount of time, whatever that is.
And then, the word is that he already has a media offer in his back pocket. That wouldn't surprise me if that's the case. It would just be interesting to me to see him sitting suited and booted on a set, providing outside noise, Gerry. I mean, that's essentially it. And that's why I kind of find it hard to believe that there isn't somebody trying to kick a tire on Mike Tomlin today to say, are you sure you don't want to coach this year? And because there are some compelling opportunities that are out there for him to jump on. That said, there are some compensation requirements now that need to be met for the Steelers. Any sense of how the Steelers, I know this is so early, but any sense of how the Steelers would view compensation for Mike Tomlin, Gerry?
Yeah, Rich, I don't know what that answer would be in terms of how much, but let's face it, you saw what other coaches commanded in terms of return compensation, and it would be at least that for Mike Tomlin, who would be even in more demand than any of those other coaches who received, who went out and were, quote, traded or sold to another team. Rich, you used the word interesting. By that, did you mean odd or curious to see Mike Tomlin in an announcing role? Because I don't. And I know from the other side, they would probably love to have him. I've never had any indication from him or the people around him that he would want to do that. So, no, I can't see him doing that. And I'm sure other teams will knock on his door, if not his agent's door, to say exactly what you said. Did you want to stay away for a short amount of time, a year or whatever? Or would you consider coming to our team? And so, I'm sure that will happen.
Yeah, and again, in the same way that Cowher, after he left, did rule over coaching carousel cycles for a few years, that will absolutely be Tomlin if he certainly is also in the public eye during the 2026 season. First order of business, Gerry. I mean, the draft is in Pittsburgh in April. I'm sure my network, I'm sure ESPN, I'm sure anybody will be knocking on Tomlin's door and say, do you want to be part of the paparazzi talking about a draft in Pittsburgh? It makes complete sense that he will start to be in the public eye if that's what he wants. And he will then lord over any coaching process with him sitting out there for sure.
Rich, I've never thought that Mike Tomlin was concerned about or was enamored with being in the public eye. Now, I can't speak, I can't speak to his ego or anything like that, but I've never had that sense that he's worried about being front and center. But you're right. I mean, it would be great for television. It would be great theater, no question. But I just don't see him wanting to do that right away. I think would be more willing to sit back and think, okay, do I want to go forward again this year, or do I want to wait? And of course, the big thing first, the Steelers and naturally their fan base, what would they get in return? I love this notion that people are showing that clip of Steve Bisciotti, the Ravens coach, raising his eyebrows when it was mentioned that Mike Tomlin stepped down. I remember Bill Cowher telling me, obviously years ago, that the one place he wouldn't go coach, despite what everybody in Cleveland thought, was that he would go be the coach of the Browns. And he said, even though he played there and coached there, he would never do that because he wouldn't do that to Pittsburgh. He wouldn't do that to the Rooney family. And I would be willing to bet everything I got. And as you know, Rich, that's countless thousands of millions of dollars he would never go. He would never go to Baltimore.
Well, and not just that. I mean, there's a job opening in Atlanta. Does he want to maybe move to Las Vegas, take a Raiders position? Tom Brady sitting at the top of that flow chart. Would that be? Listen, we already know the openings that are there right now, Gerry. But in the few minutes that I have left with you, I'd love to focus on the Steelers and the community there. I guess the first order of business is, who do you think the Steelers are thinking about? I know, again, this hasn't happened in 2 decades for a job search, but who do you think is at the top of Art Rooney II's immediate first blush wish list? Gerry Dulac.
Yeah, Rich, I'm a little rusty on this coaching search thing. It's been a while. It's been a whole 19 years. I think the 2 most attractive jobs out there, first of all, are Atlanta and New York, the Giants, because of the young quarterbacks being in place. And, Art Rooney said today that, what Mike Tomlin's decision will likely impact Aaron Rodgers, because Aaron Rodgers came to Pittsburgh because of Mike Tomlin. As for what they're looking for, Rich, even though Art Rooney said today he's not going to be, quote, narrow-minded about it, I think the template's been established here, and certainly the success has proven that to be the case, that, what they're looking for, just like their previous 3, are a young assistant in their early 30s who are defensive-minded. Chuck Noll, Bill Cowher, and Mike Tomlin all fit that mold, and I have to think they'll go the same way. They've always believed in defense wins championships. There's nothing wrong in today's NFL. I think the big key will be getting that kind of head coach, but a young one. They're not interested in any retread NFL coach. That being said, I think the smart move is you go hire a former NFL head coach, an unemployed one, to be one or both of your coordinators. That would be the key move. I don't think that interests them in terms of filling that head coach position.
Well, there's a couple of former Pittsburgh. I mean, what about having a hometown guy? You got one guy who won a championship with Mike McCarthy, who might have taken a toll money from a Rooney if a Rooney was driving him or herself around town. Did I say that right?
Right.
Okay. And then, of course,
Tan.
Pardon me. Okay, thank you. Or that current head coach at the University of Indiana. And Indiana, who getting ready to win it all. I mean, Cignetti probably never thought he would ever get a call from a Rooney saying, "What do you think?" But I understand that does not fit the mold of who you just described, Gerry, at all.
Well, going way back, they reached out to Joe Paterno to see if he wanted to be their coach, and they ended up with a Chuck Noll. Mike McCarthy, who I think, I both like Mike personally, and I think he did an outstanding job. I'm actually surprised he's been out as long as he has, to be honest. And I know it hasn't been forever, but I just don't think they want to go in that direction. I'm not going to sit here and tell you they're not. I just don't believe that they are knowing the way they want to start with a franchise when they hire a head coach. But what they will do is hire the right person. And that's what they're mostly interested in. Nobody knew who Chuck Noll was at the time outside of Don Shula. Bill Cowher, was a defensive coordinator, as was Mike Tomlin. But in today's day and age, Rich, with our social media and all the media outlets that we have, names will get thrown around, and the awareness of these young assistants are well known. Unlike the last time the Steelers went to hire Mike Tomlin, and certainly before that with Bill Cowher, and never that being the case with Chuck Noll.
Well, and the fact that Art Rooney II says the next head coach of the Steelers most likely isn't on the current staff is one of the things that folks in Pittsburgh who are happy to have a fresh start with their new head coach would point out has been an indictment of Tomlin is his coaching tree doesn't really exist in many different ways in terms of being hired by other franchises or being head coaches elsewhere. I'm sure you can make connective tissue between a Tomlin staffer and other staffs. That said, that's my long wind up to this final question for you, Gerry, is how is this all landing there in Pittsburgh? Are people mostly happy, disappointed, sad? How would you describe the boots on the ground there?
You know, Rich, for all the people who were claiming and clamoring for Mike Tomlin to be fired and it's time to get rid of him, I would just tell you in the short day and a half here now, all the people that I hear from, whether on social media, in chats that I do, in emails, whatever the case may be, all those people, I haven't heard from any of them dancing in the streets. And I think a lot of those people, who were screaming for Mike Tomlin, maybe they're quietly rejoicing, celebrating, which of course to me is preposterous. But then, I don't sit in that camp. But I think, as I believe I said earlier, it was time for a change, and that's no reflection on Mike Tomlin's ability as a head coach. That's been proven. I don't need to sit here and talk about it. And so I think the vast majority of the people understand that that's the case. But I do think that there's a lot of them who realize, wow, 19 years, this guy, let's face it, Rich, if he's not the most iconic coach in the NFL, he's right up there now, with Andy Reid, now that Bill Belichick is gone. And so when you see that after 19 years, the same amount of career wins as Chuck Noll, you sit there and you go, whoa, that's a big loss no matter what you felt about it. And it's a big void. And, Mike Tomlin was the face of the Steelers and maybe the face of Pittsburgh. You can make that argument. So whatever way you leaned on a decision, I don't think there's any question the departure of Mike Tomlin. You sit there and you go, I mean, that's a big loss, I think, for the city, even though Steeler fans would maybe think it was a gain for the franchise. Well, some Steeler fans think it would be a gain for the franchise.
Well, lots of questions just got answered with more to come. Obviously, with a coaching search that hasn't happened in 2 decades, a quarterback that no doubt will have to be found either through the draft or free agency, and then a draft itself coming up in Pittsburgh. Gerry, obviously, we will not lose your number, and we will be reaching out to you in short order. We appreciate the time today.
And Rich, whenever you call, as you know, I take the call.
Thank you so much, Gerry Dulac. Everybody, check him out on socials as well as locally on the radio, print, and so much more. Hey, you made it all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Check us out every single day streaming live on Disney Plus and the ESPN app 12 to 3 Eastern.